What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Blue Collar Enlightenment Show. It's your host, Jonah here. Welcome to the first ever video recorded Blue Collar Enlightenment Show. And we welcome David Edwards. He's a author, ex-military, correct? And
Yeah, ex-military. Yep.
We're going to be talking about Atlantis today. And
Yeah.
you know quite a lot about that. I listened to most of your YouTube videos.
Oh, did you? Good,
Yes.
good. Yeah, I'm working hard on those. It takes a long time to lay the story out. So I start at the beginning and I'm just working through it. Have you got to the Malta ones yet?
I'm at the Crete one right now. I just
Okay.
finished Crete, so after that.
They get a lot better. When I get into Malta, we actually start to find, a lot of it's kind of theory and just, almost like schoolwork, right? Setting it all up at the beginning, because you got to do that. And that's why I put in the videos, which is, how can you look for something if you don't know what you're looking for?
Correct.
So yeah, so on the YouTube channel, which is, thank you for mentioning, it's my new YouTube channel, A History Of. I'm going through the videos. I start off, I figure out where this story of Atlantis came from for real. I trace its origin all the way back to the event, which we can go over here too. And then we talk about what Plato wrote, what he knew. We break down the dialogues, and then we start looking. And I guess, in the videos, if someone's just watching the videos and they haven't read the book or listened to me talk, they're on, hopefully on the edge of their seat as they go through the journey with me. Of course, if you read the book, you can jump right to the end, because the book is a proof of where the capital city is. What the videos are doing is laying out kind of the kingdom, because Atlantis, what we know a lot of things about Atlantis from the dialogues, if we assume that these Platonic dialogues are accurate. One thing that they say in the dialogues is Atlantis was actually in 10 places. You never hear that. You always hear it's one place or something, but it was actually 10. It was 10 provinces. It had a capital, which is what we typically look for, right? It's the capital is described fairly in detail. It's that center island with the concentric rings of water and land. But there were 9 other provinces, and there were 9 other princes all over the Atlantic that ruled their own areas. So a lot of times the stuff we find, it's not the capital city of Atlantis, but it's probably left over from what was going on at the time period.
Awesome. And you're actually going to be sharing stuff with us, showing us different things, right? So to kick this off, let's tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into this.
Well, so I'm a platypus. I've been very lucky in life. I work very hard, but I got to do a lot of things. When I barely made it out of high school, and I did get into college, but I dropped out after a year. And I realized I was a smart guy, but I didn't really have the discipline that life needed to be successful. So I joined the Army. And I was in the Army in the 80s and 90s. And I was part of the team that arrested Noriega in Panama, and I saw combat there. Then I was in Honduras, what they call the Soto Cano Air Base, which a couple years before, because I'm so old, they had been flying the weapons in for the Iran-Contra thing. It had all gone through this air base in Honduras. I had no idea when I was there. What I was doing, I was attached to the DEA, and we had just started our war on drugs in the very early 90s. And what it was happening, as I understand it, the CIA had run Pablo Escobar and Noriega for a while, and had put in a trade route, if that's what you want to call it, basically a route where they could fly DC-9 planes from Colombia, they refuel them in Honduras, and then they land them in Texas. And that's how they were getting the cocaine into the country. Then Noriega broke from the CIA, and Pablo Escobar kind of broke with them. And at that point, Pablo Escobar was making like $700 million a day in cash around the world selling. I mean, just the sheer weight of the money he was making was incredible. But what we were doing was, so they kept flying the planes. We knew, the American government had set the whole thing up. So we kind of we knew all the different ways they would land. And what we would do is we would track the fuel. And then when they would land the planes, we'd confiscate the planes. So I did that for 6 months. And then my stateside assignment was with the 513th MI out of Fort Monmouth. And 2 weeks before I got there, they were forward deployed over to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So I got to take a commercial flight over to Saudi Arabia, and that's my stateside assignment. It was actually spent over there during the first Gulf War. So I had an exciting time.
Well, I appreciate your service, man.
Well, thank you. And you were in too, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I spent 6 years in the Navy.
Yeah, 6 years in the Navy. Yeah,
Six
so I did. Yeah.
long years, man. Long years.
Well, we were talking earlier, and a buddy of mine worked the flight. He was on the flight crew on an aircraft carrier, and you said you were on aircraft carriers too, right?
Yeah, I was on the George Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that? It was made of wood, right?
Yep. Yep. Wooden teeth, wooden anchors. Yeah,
Wooden teeth, wood, yeah, well, plywood for the planes, the whole thing. I know. Yeah, that's great.
I'm not gonna lie. I had a blast. I mean,
Yeah, well, and thank you for your service too. I mean, I don't even like to do that. Thank you for your service thing. I don't know how you feel about it. I feel that people say it to me as a way of dismissing the service sometimes, versus because it's I thank you for and then they're done with it. So I'm not I mean, between you and me, obviously it's a lot different, but
yeah,
that saying culturally has made a big circle.
it's
in my
awkward.
mind.
It is awkward.
Isn't it?
You
It's
make
awkward.
that point, you're
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
What? I mean, I really didn't do it for you, dude. I did it for me.
Exactly. Yeah. Was it selfless? I don't know. It was the right
Yeah.
life path for me. It had nothing to do with you. I mean, I guess thanks for paying the tax dollars, so I had got paid a salary. It wasn't very much, but
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's culturally. I mean, I'm glad the spirit of it, I think, is right.
Mhm.
But people feel obligated to do it, which takes, I think, the spirit of it away. I don't know. Yeah, like you said, it's just awkward. It's awkward. I'm uncomfortable when I hear it. So
Oh yeah. Whenever let's see, I spent probably 6, 8 months after boot camp just hanging out in Chicago, and we had to wear our uniforms out every time we left base, and you would get that constantly, just constantly.
yeah. Well, I got into a fight with a lot of people in the Navy.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I
I
don't
mean,
know. We
it
get
doesn't.
drunk and rowdy, and
Yeah,
we,
well, and in Panama, the ships were always coming and going and everything. But yeah, but I learned if I went into a bar and there were a lot of people in the Navy, I'd yell, "There's too much semen in here," and then I'd.
Oh, it's all in good camaraderie. I mean, we can
It
all
really
joke
was. It really was. And we would fight. We'd hurt each other, but there was some line you knew wouldn't get crossed, and there was. I mean, it was a way of letting off steam, honestly. So
it's just a
yeah,
good
I
time.
enjoyed it.
It's
And the
just
Navy
the
was
way
Navy. You were the funnest ones to banter with.
because we
You
always
keep.
gave it back. You know, the Marines, they're so hot headed and short fused
I
that
was
they
just, I was
can't
just gonna
take it.
say, yeah, you can't say anything to them. They get mad. They want to fight right away. It's like I'm not trying to,
Mhm.
dude. I just, wash your fucking hands when you leave the bathroom. I don't know, but don't get mad at me.
The biggest
Marines.
thing I could say about the Marines is remember that you have an anchor behind that eagle.
That's right.
Don't forget where y'all come from.
Someone's got to get you there, right? Yeah. The Air Force guys, I actually worked on an Air Force base. I lived on an Army base, but our office, whatever you want to call it, was on an Air Force base in Panama. And the Air Force guys, they only have to run a mile for their PT.
Oh, dude, it's worse than that now. Because when
Is
I
that right?
got out, they were doing they were doing heck, they were starting to do it in all the branches. They're letting them do it on ellipticals and stationary bikes
What's
and
an elliptical? You see,
treadmills.
I think I'm older than you. When were you in?
From 2007 to
Yeah.
2013.
Damn,
And
goddamn.
that
I was in 20 years before you.
yeah, well, it's a whole
Golly.
different I call it the culture as it was really starting to change out of the older ways
Yeah.
of doing things. And so when I got out, I seen the change in the way they were going.
Yeah.
It was the
Look, when I
PT
got.
turned into crap because you weren't working out anymore. You were doing like Pilates and yoga and stuff like that. You weren't doing anything productive. You
I
know.
have no reference for that whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. No, they worked as hard. When I was, 20 years. My basic training, I went to Fort Dix, which they closed like a couple years after I was there, and I was in the first platoon, the first company, the first battalion that went through basic training where we had female drill sergeants. They still
Mm.
trained separately. I don't know if they train separately today or not, but they had integrated. We were integrated. The forces were integrated, but the basic training was separated. Except they had just let female drill sergeants in on the to the male side, and I was the first group. We had the first, like, as far as I know, the first female drill sergeant, or at least one of the first. Um, and she was mean, man. She
I
was all
bet.
over. She was all over me. She had proven something, and I was the one she was going to prove it to. You know, it was just like
She had a point to prove,
she
and
did.
she needed the person to prove it to. Yeah, I
Yep.
was in, well, let's say, I can't speak for all the other branches, but we had females in our barracks in boot camp,
Yeah.
and
Oh, in boot camp. In boot camp.
they were finding they would have a male and a female in the male office, and it would seem like weekly they would find that male and female doing some dirty stuff in the mailroom, and
Yeah.
so the
See,
male people got changed constantly.
basic training, I don't know anything about, culturally, I don't know. In basic training, you haven't learned the military discipline yet.
Hmm.
Not that you don't do incredibly more stupid stuff once you're done, but you do learn something, and you haven't learned it yet. So yeah, that's I can see that happening. I know
I think,
we had a guy just in basic training who we had payphones, and he rang up like $8,000 worth of calling, like, the sex lines, instead of calling home. He's calling
holy
collect.
crap.
Yeah, I know. And they kind of what, yeah, I think he went to army jail. I mean, they came and got him because who was going to pay? He didn't have it. So it's crazy.
Sitting in the booth. Oh yeah, I needed to hear that.
Exactly. It's like, I don't know, dude. I mean, basically, it was tough, but it wasn't that tough. My Lord, $8,000. That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a couple weeks, man. Just hold it in.
Yeah, yeah, I know, exactly. But anyway,
Uh,
okay, we reminisce. Yeah, so sorry. So I guess I was telling you about myself. So I did all that stuff, and I got out, and I could have reenlisted, just like you probably, but I said, you
mhm.
know what? College doesn't look anywhere near so bad now. So, and I had learned, I had learned what I needed to learn. So I actually went back to school. I started a company, which is doing very well, still is in existence today. I still own it. And then I went back to school, and I earned a bachelor's degree. I earned 3 master's degrees and a doctorate in engineering. So I
Wow.
have that background. And then I was president of a university for a number of years. Aspen University is a good school. So I have a foot, and I've taught tons of courses. I've taught all the way from community colleges to graduate programs, both online and on ground and all that. I taught at the Community College of Denver for many years when I was in Colorado. From that, I moved back to Florida because Colorado's cold, if you keeping score.
Yep.
And when the pandemic hit, the company was doing okay. And what we do is we produce safety technology that goes into North American commercial transporters, like semi trucks and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
So lockdowns or no lockdowns, I mean, we certainly saw an impact, but the freight's got to roll, and it did roll for the most part. So our systems were still in use. But so I had time because I didn't have to do very much. So I started writing. And I've written 45 books. I've written 45 books in however long we've been locked down. Or I know we're not locked down now, but 2.5, 3 years. Let's say 3 years.
And a lot of
Um,
them are right there behind you on the wall.
Yep. So yeah, behind me, like this one, Panama Red. This is kind of my biggest hit, I guess. It's the first in a series, and there are all the books in the series on the bottom there. And this has sold 100,000 copies, so which is pretty good. And it's not Stephen King good, but it's better than self-publishing normally by
Yeah.
quite a bit. Um, and it's historically based on what was going on in Central and South America when I was there in the 80s and 90s, but it's not. It's fiction. It's not. I'm not inserting myself into. I'm not telling any stories I did. Although I do put notes at the beginning. Some of the action set pieces are things that actually happened. The context is completely different, but just it's like we raided they had in Panama. There was what they call the PDF, the Panamanian Defense Force,
Yep.
and for the first 8-9 months I was there, we were hostile towards them, kind of, but we're also in country. They were the police, but things got worse. So we had problems. And before we invaded, about a month before we invaded, 5 weeks before we invaded, it kind of all went to heck. We were locked down on the post, and the PDF had started capturing soldiers that were out and then interrogating them. And they had done that to a second lieutenant in our company, and we went and got them basically at a police station. And so that's in the book, completely different context, but because there was gunfire and everything, but those kinds of things. But people seem to like it. They tell me it's dark and gritty. I thought it was fun. I thought I thought like an adventure book. But I don't
Well,
know.
our type of fun and a civilian's type of fun is two different things.
Yeah, yeah.
Way two different
It
things.
must. It really is. It really is, because I really thought this was fun, and it is. I mean, it is fun, but I reread it. And it's like, okay, yeah, okay. There's some grittiness. So in the second book, Drive Faster, I made pure fun. It's like I don't know, it's like an 90-minute action movie. And then I basically alternated. And the third book is dark and serious again. Then this one, which I think is the best one, Prayer Drum, I think is my best book. They go on an adventure in what they call the Dorian Gap, and there's cannibals and headhunters and all kinds of cool stuff. And then the last book's kind of dark, but yeah, the Prayer Drum's kind of an event. But anyway, so I tried to alternate them in the series. So,
Do you have any of them out on audiobook?
I have the Panama Red. I have on audio, but I don't have it where anyone can buy it. I sell it when I go to trade shows and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And I recorded the audio for it. And I, it's the hardest thing maybe I've ever done. It is so hard to read your own work back, in a commercial way. But if you pay someone for one of these audiobooks, you got to pay them a couple $1,000s to read it.
Wow.
And I mean, I did okay money wise, but if I paid $2,000 for every book, that I have 45 books, that's getting to be a lot of fat. That's $90,000. I mean, I'm not going to probably make $90,000 back on audiobooks. So yeah, it's
That's
tough.
a lot of money.
Yeah, it would be. But yeah, but so that's half the books. The other half is history books. I like history, and I like ancient history. So I've written books on the Mayan, the Aztec, the Inca, all kinds of books like that. And I've written some other books. Like if I researched a topic for one of my fiction books, like I did a book that had Harry Houdini in it. So I released that as all my notes and my research. I released as a book on Harry Houdini. That kind of stuff. So they kind of fed off each other. And then maybe a year ago at this point, maybe 10 months ago, because I'm an old guy that I keep saying, and I can't sleep. I'll watch YouTube at night when I'm out of TV and there's nothing else on. And YouTube fed me a video on Atlantis. This channel, Bright Insight, by this guy, Jimmy Corsetti. And he was actually in the Army too. He was in the Army Reserve. In fact, he was in the same time you were in, but he was in the reserves, but then they got called up. So he actually was in Iraq as a reservist for like a year and a half. I mean, a whole tour.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and he kind of backed into his Army experience. But when he was there, he looked at a lot of the ancient stuff, which is kind of where the bug bit him. And then he is the one who kind of had the video that went viral about this Rishat structure, which is what we're going to talk about, as far as being the capital of Atlantis. And I watched his videos. I'm like, man, dude, I mean, he does a pretty good. He's a way better salesman than I am. He doesn't have the background I have, the education and all, and he's not as well read as I am. I've read all Plato and all the ancient Greek stuff just casually because I like reading it. But he put it all together. But he got a few things wrong. So anyway, I wanted to jump in and help him because he doesn't do it. He's been on Joe Rogan, but he doesn't quite close the sale. And I've talked to him. He's a nice guy. He's a brilliant guy. Because he's not confident enough like to close the deal. So I'm like, dude, we got to close the deal because I think this is it. I think it's been solved. And if it's been solved and we can get the word out and it can be accepted as having been solved, then we've just doubled human history. And now we can start standing on that precipice because we're talking about 9600 BCE, we can get into why that's the date. But now we can stand on that precipice and look even farther back. Right now, that's as far back as we can see. That's as far back as we even look. We don't even look that far back, honestly. They look back to about 7000 BCE, which is about 9,000 years ago.
Right.
Academics. So what I'm doing, the book is just a proof. The book just goes through what the Platonic dialogues say, and it decomposes them, and then it does the geographical analysis, right, for this Rishat structure. What I'm doing with the YouTube videos is laying out the whole case, all the research I did that got me to that conclusion. Because, I can just look and read something and maybe it takes me half an hour, but that doesn't mean everyone knows that I read it and understands why I made the leaps that I made. So I'm trying to, in these videos, kind of methodically walk through everything because it's incredibly interesting. And when you dig into it, you start to see that the argument that something was going on during the last ice age is very strong. It's not just compelling. And people in this space, they tend to say things like archaeologists and anthropologists don't agree. They don't believe in Atlantis or this or that. So the other thing I'm doing when I go through these videos is I break down how far apart we are from the established academic view with the view that would mean what Plato tells us about Atlantis is true. And what we find time and time again is just not as far apart as it's said to be. It's within, like, time is a lot of what I'll use for measurements. So for example, Crete, which is an island in the Mediterranean, it's a Greek island. It's in kind of sits between Greece and Egypt.
Right.
And it had the Minoans were on it, which we kind of all know. Anytime you ever watch any video on Atlantis ever, they start with Crete every single time, either Crete or Santorini. But Crete, and the thing with Crete is there was a big temple there, and there's like they have all the frescoes, the murals on the wall. They're still there, so they can see them. And it's called Knossos, Knossos, and it looks Atlantean because they had a bull cult, and they jump over bulls and stuff, and that stuff that's talked about around Atlantis. That island, which is very big, has been inhabited for 130,000 years, it turns out. When I learned this in my research, and I'm like, okay. So then I started asking academics, well, how long have boats been around? And maybe 4,000 years, they'll say, ish. It's like, well, wait, okay. So I have a tool that will lower the ocean levels up or down. So you got to lower them 400 feet to see what it looked like in 9600 BCE, which is the time of the tale. And when you lower it, not much changes around Crete, but there's no land bridge or anything. I mean, it's still dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of miles. Might not be 100 miles, but it's getting close to that. To anything else, and you'd have to island hop, and you can't swim. No one's putting their family and their dog on their back and swimming from Greece to Crete, 100,000 years ago. Who would do that?
Yeah.
So the fact it's populated is interesting, and it's not really addressed in the legends. But we know the academic view of Crete is that in 7,000 BCE there was a cultural transformation, an agrarian transformation, where they transitioned from Neolithic hunter-gatherers to an agrarian Neolithic society. Okay, that's interesting because 9600 BCE and 7000 BCE are getting pretty close. Yeah. I mean, it's like if you take all the years between 9600 and now and you figure the gap out, it's like a 27% gap. But that's not that big a gap. And these dates back this far in time, it's not like your birthday, my birthday. I mean, it's very much an estimation. And the example I use is Malta, which is another island in the Mediterranean. Up until the belief all through my life, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, the teens, all of that has been that agricultural transformation happened on Crete in 7000 BC, happened on Malta in 5200 BCE. So like 1800 years later, even though they're not terribly far apart, but it's a pretty big gap. But then in 2018, they found a team in Queen's College in Budapest. Is it Budapest? I think it's Budapest or Belfast. Belfast, I think. They did research and they found DNA in teeth that pushed that 5200 date back to 5900. So pushed it back 700 years. Well, that was just 4 years ago. I mean, so that gap, the gap is constantly closing, and they're constantly finding things that push the dates farther back. They're not finding stuff that bring the dates forward. So what happens when you look at Atlantis and you look at all those provinces, and you even look at the Rishat structure and all the stuff we found there, there is no academic that's going to argue that these places were occupied. They would agree, probably are occupied. Mm-hmm. The question just becomes, were they Atlantis? And then what you get into is you have a perception problem. Because what we hope Atlantis is nuclear submarines, UFOs, death ray crystals, and an advanced, agrarian society of peace-loving, I don't know, right?
Alien type fish,
alien philosophers,
things.
yeah, fish things, yeah, right, whatever, yeah. But if you push all that aside and you just say, okay, maybe Atlantis was just a bunch of organized people during the Neolithic period doing stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, is there any precedent for that? Turns out there is. There's this thing called Göbekli Tepe, which is not, it's far away, it's a couple thousand miles away, but it's still in the same part of it's still around the Mediterranean. And Göbekli Tepe, which they found in the either 50s or 60s, but it's only really in the past 10 years, mostly because of Graham Hancock, who everyone hates right now, been thoroughly investigated. And academically, it has a hard date to that 9600 BCE date. So we can go look at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and other places they're finding. I think there's like 10 of these tepes they're finding. And I think we finally found the beginning of something. Because a lot of times, like in Egypt, for example, you find stuff, but you can't really find the progression. All of a sudden in 2900 BCE, the first dynasty of Egypt materializes because they have writing. Mm-hmm. Well, we can't really find the pre-writing stuff. It just burst onto the scene, with writing. And the same thing, and many places you look at seem to have that. You go over into South America and Central America, a lot of in Mexico and all that, a lot of the temples, the Mayan temples, the Aztec temples, the Inca temples, you look at them and it looks like the foundation is using bigger blocks and is better built than the stuff that's higher up. And it looks like the stuff that's higher up has been rebuilt.
Isn't there a temple down there that has a pyramid stacked on a pyramid, stacked on a pyramid?
In Mexico City?
I think it's somewhere down it's either South America or in the Mexican area, but there's a temple that it's a pyramid that there's another pyramid built on top, and they're saying that these pyramids were built over time. The first one was built and it started degrading, and so they decided to build another one, and there's some kind of significance to this temple that they wanted to preserve them.
You find that everywhere in Central and South America. You find that everywhere. Now, some people will argue that they're not being rebuilt, that it's just how they built it, and that's closer to the mainstream view-ish sometimes. But if you just look, it's so obvious. You can look. There's actually and the guy who I go to for this is named Brian Forrester. Have you heard of him, Brian Forrester?
I have not.
I highly recommend looking him up on YouTube. If anyone's listening, look him up on YouTube. He's got a channel. What he does, he runs tours. He lives in Lima, Peru, and he runs tours all over South America. But he records it all on video, and then every day or two he'll release a video of him just walking around one of these sites. But so watching his channel, you can see firsthand all these places you'd never be able to get to, and he's literally just walking around. So it's even better than like a documentary because he's showing you everything. And he talks while he's doing it, and he explains stuff. And that's basically his theory: is you can look and you can see the different layers of technology, and they looks like the farther back in time you go, it seems like the technology is more advanced and it's getting less advanced. And I say all of that because with these tepes in Turkey, that's not what we found. We've actually found earlier tepes, these stone constructions that are very massive, and we can see them getting better at it. And it kind of culminating in this Göbekli Tepe thing in 9600 BCE. But to get better at it, you're talking about hundreds of years, probably, of work. But this is one of the first times we found that progression. We don't normally find that progression. So it could be that we're onto something with this time period.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's take a quick break real quick, and we'll come back and just a quick ad break. This episode is brought to you by MyArkit.com. MyArkit.com is an online digital archival company preserving the legacy of loved ones and friends. Everyone, we live our lives digitally, cradle to grave, and we save them to devices, clouds, and social media sites that either delete you, censor you, or get lost due to faulty equipment or mishandling. We have thousands of pictures and videos on our devices that get clicked away with no story behind the images that give them real meaning and emotion. Imagine your great-great-grandkids being able to bring up your pictures and videos to hear your life and your words and thoughts. People want to be remembered, and people want for you to be remembered. So head to myarkit.com. That's MyArkit.com, and start recording your legacy for your future generations to enjoy. And we're back. this we're going to roll into a different segment now where you got a little bit of proof that you're going to show to us of different places. And yeah, let's proceed into that.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. Everything has changed. Hold on.
There we go.
Okay. Can you see this? Can you see my mouse moving?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a free flood map I use. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use Google Earth, and I'm just going to use some images that we find. Anyone can go here. It's floodmap.net. And what this does is it allows you to set the water level up or down so you can see what happens when the sea levels rise or fall.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
So this is it's one of the first tests I do when I'm examining a place for Atlantis, because the first place I'll do is I drop the sea level 400 feet, because that's how far down it was when all the ice was on the ice caps during the last ice age instead of in the water. And then I look at it and I see if it tells me anything. So here we're just talking about Crete. We'll look at three things. We're going to look at Crete, then we're going to look at Malta, and then we're going to look at where I think the capital city is. Because I think these two places were one of those provinces, but I think the capital city is in this thing called the Rishat structure, which we'll look at.
So it's not really out of the question to think that Atlantis isn't just a city, but a whole empire.
Well, so one of the things that I think is, Atlantis has become so confused, and so many people have said something, spoken about it as though they knew what they were talking about. Some people do, some people don't. Some people listen to someone that knows what they're talking about, and then they try and repeat it. What the dialogues tell us is that Atlantis was three things. It was a capital city, which is what we all hear about, is what we all talk about.
Right.
The capital city was on a continent. And then Atlantis was a kingdom made up of the capital city and 9 other provinces, for a total of 10 provinces. And they were ruled by 5 sets of twins. Each person ruled one of the provinces, but they were born in twins. And they were supposedly the sons of Poseidon and a mountain farm girl. That's not important to me. But I think but it gives us the names of all of the princes, all the sons, all the twins. And I think those names tie to places that phonetically or linguistically we can research to see if they link to any of these other places that some people think is Atlantis. So and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to come up with like a unified way of looking at this that answers, that is the simplest answer and uses all the information and all the passion that people have. So some people will tell you that Atlantis was Crete, which is this thing right here. Okay. Now when they say Atlantis was Crete, this is the first thing. What do they mean when they say Atlantis? No one knows what they mean. What they think it's got to be one place. And typically when they say what they think they know where it is they think that they're typically talking about the capital, the city with the rings. Okay. So we'll look for that, but let's just look. We know. So here's Greece. Here's Egypt. One of the things that the Platonic dialogues tell us is that the Atlanteans, who were located outside of the Strait of what they call Heracles, which we think is the Strait of Gibraltar, which is right here. So the Atlanteans, the capital city, it says, is somewhere out here, somewhere outside of this thing right here. So these are the Azores, could be those. This is the Rishats, could be right here. Some people think it's Spain, whatever. But what people, so it can't be Crete, it's too close. But they like this because it is a bonkers place, man. I mean, there is so much preserved history here, and it's a high society and it's an exotic society. I mean, it is crazy stuff. At one point, have you ever heard the stories of the Minotaur and the maze and all that?
Yes.
Well, this is where those stories come from. The capital Gnosis it's like right in here somewhere. This map doesn't show when the other one does, but there was a time that these guys were so dominant that the Mycenaean Greeks, so this is back in during the Bronze Age, would have to send all the Greeks, all these places all around in here had to send sacrificial people to the island, and then they would literally, chase them around. It wasn't like a maze like how it's been kind of fictionalized,
right?
But when you look at the buildings, the substructure was very confusing, and these people would go there and they wouldn't come back. So the thought is, something bad happened to them. But anyway, so when we lower the water, so I'm going to do 125 meters, which is 400 feet.
Okay.
And when we lower it around Crete, not much happens. So we get to see this lighter blue. That's land that at this lower elevation, sea level, is above water. That would be that it was below that is below water today. So there are lots of places to look all along here for interesting things. But see, there's no. I mean, there's no land bridge. You're still. What are you doing? Swimming or you're in some kind of canoe or something? I don't know, but you're getting here somehow. But that's the water level. But when you go to Google Earth, whoa, sorry, I left it on something. When we go to Google Earth, here's the thing I found, and I've not heard this found before. So we'll break it here on your first ever video podcast.
Hell yeah.
So remember, I showed you the water levels don't do anything interesting here, right? Nothing, here is so far down. This island gets bigger, but nothing happens here. But when we look, and this whole basin, all of this, what we call the Mediterranean, the Strait of Gibraltar broke like, I don't know the exact date, millions of years. Let's say 1 million years ago. That's not too far off. It's like 1 million and something years ago. And when it broke, all the seawater came flooding in. So up until 1 million years ago, all of this was like Death Valley today. It's below sea level, but there was no water, right?
Okay.
And so then I looked at Crete and I found this. What the hell is this? And the scale of it is massive. So this is 20 kilometers is that. So this is about 20 kilometers across. It's huge. And it's like 1,000 feet down. And I've looked at it, and I don't think it's artifacts. I mean, it rolls with how you look at this. Now, I don't think this is Atlantis. I just think this is kooky. And you come at it this way, and if the sea's down here, this kind of makes sense. There's like a way up to it. I think this looks like a pyramid to me, underwater, when you look at it.
Interesting.
Right? But this, what the hell is that? I mean, look how it's laid out. Over 20,
There's some
20
up
kilometers.
to the north side too.
Yeah, there's stuff up here. I don't know what this is, but it's not, and I'm sure it's the same. If look at this one. What's that? And they're all here. This fell away or something. So I think so. My general theory, which I have no support for, it's not in my book. I'm not pitching this to people, but what I think is we have gone through many cycles where societies get started and then something bad happens and we get wiped out. I think it's been going on for there's been 23 species of humans on the planet so far. We are the 23rd iteration of people. And if you and I had this conversation last year, shoot, if we'd had this conversation in April of this year, I would have told you there were 22 species of people because they just found a 23rd species in May of this year, of 2022. So my point is we have no clue what happened. But so I think if this was all dry land, right, and it's thousands of feet down, I think it's worth, I think someone should go look, and I cannot find that anyone has, because when I look at this, I mean, to me, it looks exactly like the LiDAR that we're now getting from the Amazon.
Yeah.
Right. That's just what, and what LiDAR is when, all those buildings are covered over. Now this would be silt and seafloor and that kind of stuff. But to my eye, that just looks like something. But so anyway, there's nothing to do with Atlantis. That's one of the things I found in my journey here. When we come back to the flood map, let me show you. I want to show you Malta because Malta is crazy. So let me put this back at 0 just so I can tell the tale here. So this is Malta right here. That's all it is. It's this little tiny island. When we look at it here, it's right here. So here's Malta. This is Sicily, Malta, Sicily. Tunisia is here. Morocco's over here. Spain's up here. Okay. Now we come here. This is one of the only places I found. There's 2 other places where this happens on my quest for the Atlantean provinces. But with this one, you lower the sea level that 400 feet, 125 meters, and something very amazing happens to the Mediterranean. We get 2, I call them peninsulas. They could be called islands, whatever you want to call this. So what happens is, if you look, the entire Mediterranean shrinks, and the only way through it, if you could control this little strait right here, this, you're a Navy guy. You could control the flow in and out of Greece and everywhere. But you don't have to, you don't have to have an army that controls all this. You just got to control this. Right?
Huh.
So if you were doing that, we'd have to find a couple things for us to be able to claim that this is science, not speculation, right? So now Malta has 66 stone temples and megaliths, and it is the most dense and amazing place for megalithic stone construction, Neolithic construction in the world. It's incredible. I didn't pull up any images, but anyone just search on Malta and megalithic or Neolithic, and it's very well researched. But what I tell people, because I've got my military training, and I was a counterintelligence agent, so I learned how to look at our troops and look at their troops and try and figure out, based on what they're doing, what are they going to do, kind of stuff, right? So I said, if it were me, and Plato tells us that the Atlanteans they attacked and they conquered Libya, as far as Egypt, which is all this area right here, and they conquered parts of Europe, as far as what they call Tyrrhenia, which is what this is the Tyrrhenian Sea right here, and basically Italy is like Tyrrhenia. So basically, he's saying that the Atlanteans conquered all this, and then they conquered, it would, just on the shore, all the way down here, all the way to Egypt. And then he tells us that at some point, so they came in, they conquered it, and at some point the Greeks fought their way out, and they fought the way out here to wherever the capital city is, and that was when it got destroyed. But what that means is, because we're historians, we're engineers, we're historians, we're logical generalists. That means we know two things happened here. This is what it looked like. We know the Atlanteans fought their way in, and we know at some point the Greeks fought their way out, if this story is true. So I looked at this, I'm like, okay, if I'm the second lieutenant who's in charge of the Sicilian Malta Strait, what would I do? And this is during the Neolithic, so I've got crude boats at best, rafts probably, canoes, that kind of stuff, and I've got to control this waterway. Well, what I would do is I would set up a tower here looking this way, and then I would set up a tower here looking out this way, and I would have some type of fire communication system, right? Because with fire in line of sight, you can send all kinds of military commands. So that's what I would do. So if this were what that is, and if I'm right, then we should find on this submerged land, we should find megalithic constructions, right?
Sure.
Also, right? I mean, they could be there and we haven't found them, but if we found any here, the story I just told you, they support that story, and they're the only logical reason, because we're talking about land that was only above water during and before the last ice age. At 9600 BC, this goes underwater. So if someone built something here, they had to build it when it was above water. Well, there's this thing called the Sicilian Channel Monolith. And let's see if I can find I didn't prep as much as I could. Let's see. I'm seeing if I can find a map real quick. Yeah, here. Okay, here, perfect. So this is that landmass that I was just showing you on our flood. See, here it is on our flood map. Right? Here is this is the academics drawing of it, same landmass. And here's where it is, right there. And these are other anomalies they found, by the way, here. And look, even this one, it's on an island that's not there now. This one, look at that. Look what they're finding them, right here. And these are islands that were only above water during and before the last ice age. You can see it here, minus 130 meters. I'm at ours is 125, so it's the same basic thing. And they concluded the same thing I just told you. The academic paper. In fact, this is actually this is a different one, but I'll see if I can find it in here. Oh, this is a picture of it. So this is a picture of some of it. It fell over. This is a raised mound. There's like something leading up to it, and then these were standing, and they've fallen over. They're 12 meters long, I think. They're 40-foot long, and it's 60 meters down. See, and even this is in the academic view is the same date. I say 9600. They say this land was up as recently as 9000, but it went under during the last ice age. But the point is, this is the academic analysis puts the infrastructure here that fits that would only have been built during the Atlantis time, during 9600.
And they're doing all this with sonar now, aren't they? Mapping out the seafloor.
Yeah, sonar, and then I think they just dive and find. I don't know. I don't know how they found it, but it's incredible, because what this means is that there were people here.
Yeah.
In 9600 BCE, and before, and they were doing something massive. Well, the only history we have that says there were people here is the Atlantean story that we get from Plato. There isn't another story. We have no other history that could explain what this is. There is no history that explains what this is other than the Atlantis story. So that's interesting, right?
Very
That's interesting.
compelling.
It's very compelling. Yeah. So you can kind of see them here. Now there's another one they found, and this one I'm not going to be able to look this up. It's like right here. This is like the capital city-ish, and sits like right here. It's 2 miles or 2 kilometers north. It's like right here, and it's another temple they found, and it sits kind of like right here. So it's still it's still on the it only would have been above ground, or I think this one's 60 meters down. So it could have been like another 2,000 years later or something. So it might have been 7,000 BCE. It could have been 9,600, but whatever it is, it's right here. And my gut is that there's stuff everywhere. The other thing that Malta has, Malta ruts. It's got these. It's the only place. Well, these are found in lots of places in the world, but Malta, it has the highest density of these. Massive cart ruts.
Yeah.
150 places, and they are worn into the limestone bedrock, as you can see, sometimes down as far as a foot or two.
That's insane.
Don't know what that means, but you know what's really interesting? What's really interesting is a lot of them run right into the water, and they go down 400 feet, and some of them run off of cliffs. But there's massive physical evidence of something, and I don't know what made them. People will argue it's not carts because some of them get kind of wonky looking. Some of them look like cart tracks. Some of them could be something else. I don't care what made them. Just like I don't care what caused the catastrophe that happened 9600 BCE. What I care about is they go underwater, and no one was driving carts 400 feet underwater to leave ruts. The only time that would have happened when the land was above water. And the only time it was above water was during the Atlantis story, the same time, 9600 BCE. So Malta, like I say, Malta is crazy. Malta, to me, locks in the time, and it provides some anecdotal evidence supporting the tale. Because, we're finding things in here, and this is south. See, here's the Tyrrhenian Sea right here, but it's kind of like this. So this is just, this would have been the entrance to it. So we know the Atlanteans got to here because he tells us that they did. And this is one of the only names that's still the same as it is today, by the way. But see, this is even weird. Look, you can see rivers. That's just weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's probably 1,000 feet down.
And if you really took that down that far, and if you look at that land bridge that we were talking about, that would have been way below water.
Oh, yeah.
Right there, right by Rabat.
I don't see it.
Over there, when it goes out into the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, this side?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even, I don't know, I haven't done the research. I don't know if a modern channel was cut here or not. I'm sure it was. Because you look at this, clearly work's been done. But, I mean, this is a major sea channel. But it's also, I don't think it would be important to work this today. But I don't know. I haven't looked it up. I haven't done any research on that. But let me show you. Let me show you. I don't want to. We can't go for 4 hours. So here is where I think. So I think it's in Mauritania. Okay. Now a lot of people like the Azores, and I think the Azores were one of those provinces. Matter of fact, one of the twins, the eldest of the fifth set of twins, his name was Azor. Well, and now we have the Azore Islands. No one knows where that name came from. It's a Spanish Portuguese name, but they don't know the origin of it. Now, what people think that maybe this whole thing came up, and that was the continent that sunk, and it was Atlantis. It's not, but it was. But the Azores were absolutely part of the Atlantean kingdom. And then here are the Canary Islands. And then what Plato tells us, he says that the way to Atlantis was also the way to the opposite continent. So I was like, well, shit, how can we figure that out? Because everyone thinks, today we're so stupid. And none of us do anything today. So we say, oh, well, that must mean you go straight out. You hit the Azores, and you wind up here in New York or something. That's not how that's not how the sea lanes work. So what I did is I said, you know what? How can I test this? So I looked at all the 15th, 16th, and 17th century or hundreds trade routes that started to emerge. And then I also looked at Columbus, because people forget Columbus actually came to the New World he did 4 trips, not just one trip, 4 trips. So I'm like, well, let me see how he went. because the first time he had no idea how to get here, and by the fourth time he's going to be pretty good at getting, over here. So the Egyptian priests. Oh, the other thing I didn't show you. So the history of Atlantis. I know I'm jumping around. I set that whole thing up. Now I'm jumping over here. The history of Atlantis was stored at the Temple of Neith at Sais, which is right in here somewhere. It's on the Western Nile Delta. If I typed it out, here, I'll type it in, Sais. And I point this out. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. Because this is it right here. This is it. This is the temple. Now it's in ruins, but we know it's there, and we know we have a tremendous history on it. This is the Temple of Neith. This is where Solon, the guy in Plato's story, visited, because Neith or Sais was the capital of Egypt during Plato's time. And on these walls right here is where the story of Atlantis was chiseled in stone in 3000 BCE.
Huh.
Before the first Egyptian dynasty. The first dynastic dynasty is 2900 BCE. This temple, the story of Atlantis, shows up at 3000 BCE. And Neith, who is the creator goddess, she's the mother goddess of the entire Egyptian pantheon. The Neith cult starts to show up kind of in this area around 6000 BCE. So the Neith creator goddess. And what's interesting, female goddess. And what's interesting is on Malta, they have no idea who it is, but there are tons of idols, and there was a religion based around a female creator goddess. Just interesting. Don't know, just interesting. But so I showed you that. But anyway, sorry. So what Columbus did when so he left about here, and the first time he went to the Canaries, and then he went straight across like everyone thinks you're supposed to. And if you remember, his trip took 10 weeks, and it was a disaster. Like they didn't have wind. His crew wanted to mutiny. They almost ran out of food. So he goes this way. He flounders all in here, and he winds up in the Bahamas right here. So that was his first trip, which was awful. And then he comes back, stops in the Azores, and gets back. His second trip, he goes farther south, and he winds up here south of Puerto Rico. His third trip, he comes all the way down here to these guys, the Cape Verde Islands, and then he goes across. Because the way the ocean currents run, it's like a toilet bowl. This is the easiest way to go, this way. So you don't go here because there's no current. So if you don't have wind, nothing's not much moving. It's all moving here at the edges. So you come down here, you go down the coast, you cross, which is also the shortest point, and then that's how you do it. That's how he did it, and that's how the trade routes still run today. But so anyway, Plato tells us that the way to Atlantis, you go by a bunch of islands, and then it's the way to the opposite continent, which it is. If you can see, you come by here. Here's the opposite continent, which also means that these priests right here in 3000 BCE knew about the opposite continent. That's freaking groundbreaking. Why isn't that in our history books? It's written down. I'm not even interpreting it. It's just, you just go read it. Anyway, long story. So you zoom into this thing, and you start to see something. This is the Sahara Desert, but it looks like that description of the Atlantic capital that we get. It's got a center, and then it's got alternating rings of land. Now we know in 9600 BCE, this was what they called the Green Sahara. So this was like Georgia. Good solid rain, really good agriculture fields and all of that. This was a lake. This is about 10 miles right here. And then you can see it kind of. The river would have flowed to here. But this is inland, and there's nothing any of us have ever heard. Why would Atlantis be in the middle of the Sahara Desert? That's like the opposite of everything we hear. It's supposed to be in the Atlantic, sunken somewhere, right? Well, one of the lines that Plato has that gets ignored, people that look at this, I don't know why they feel like they can ignore it, but here's what it says. It says, the country immediately about and surrounding the city was a level plain, itself surrounded by mountains, which descended towards the sea. It was smooth and even, of an oblong shape, extending in the one direction 3000 stadia. Okay. Well, the city, so it's extending in the one direction 3000 stadia, gently sloping towards the sea. Well, so what's the stadia? That might be the first question, right?
Yep.
Stadia is 606.9 feet. That's the Alexandrian measure. It's the unit they used in Greece during Plato's time. I rounded to 607 feet because I'm lazy. Just, we're not dealing with that much precision. So if one of those is 607, if we want 3,000 of them, we multiply that by 3,000, and we get this crazy number. It's a big number, but it's a bunch of feet. Then we divide it by a mile to see how many miles that is. Okay, 344, basically 345 miles. So he says the country immediately bounced around the city was a level plain itself, surrounded by mountains, which descended towards the sea, smooth and even, oblong shape, extending in one direction, 345 miles. Okay, interesting. Okay, well, I call this my Atlantis test. So, how far is this thing from the sea? I don't want feet, miles. 345 miles. You get the idea. I mean,
Yeah.
but how's that? How's that possible? How can that be 345 miles? You can play with it a little bit, but you get the idea. Yeah, 346. Yeah, it's how far. It's 3,000 states. It's how far he says it is. So that's the first thing I measured because I had never. I read the dialogues myself. I'd never heard that line, so I'm like, well, let me look. I'm like, holy cow! And that was what got me. That and this view right here, where you can clearly see that if a tsunami came in, you can clearly see the runoff, even if it was thousands of years ago. You can kind of see it better from this direction. You can see the water coming out and pulling the sand down and everything. But then I have a picture. Graham Hancock's second book, I think it's the second book, Fingerprints of the Gods. His first book was The Sign and the Seal, which is brilliant. He finds the Lost Ark of the Covenant. Piri Reis map. Okay. He opens his most famous book, Fingerprints of the Gods, with this thing called the Piri Reis map. So the Piri Reis map, is a good copy of it? I need one that's going here. This is going the right way. Okay. Oh, really? The Piri Reis map is a well-known map, and it is was commissioned by a open image and new tab. Here we go. Yeah, it's gonna be grainy, but we'll get the. Oh, that's terrible. Hold on, I apologize.
It's all right. We got time.
Okay. Here, I'll use this one because it looks like it's easy to see, but it's tilted to the side. I'll try and explain it as we go through it here. Oh, here, this guy's selling them, so that's good. There we go. Okay.
$25. You can go get the map, people.
You can get the map. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. So now this is going to be confusing. Can I turn this? Okay. So this is the correct. So in this orientation, so here's Africa. See the elephant? I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah, I can
on this
see
video.
that.
Okay. So with this one, we're looking at the elephant's up here because it's turned. See, north is over here.
Yeah.
So this is west. But we can see this one a lot better. So when you look at this map, I'll do this one, then I'll go to the one we can all see and understand. It was commissioned from a bunch of older maps. So this Piri Reis guy was an Ottoman navigator, and he commissioned the map so that when they went sailing around, he wanted all the trusted ancient maps they had access to because there's tons of them. And then all these are his notes. And so then he sailed around and he took notes on how good the map was. All the noise around the map is because, and this was commissioned in it was like 22 years after Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. So this is like 1514 or something like that. Okay. And it seems like here's Cuba, although it also kind of looks like Japan. This is Florida. It seems like there's more detail, especially when you get into South America, than could have been known at the time. It seems like this shows the Antarctic shelf when the water level is 400 feet down, like we've been looking at, because when you look at it, see, it does this weird thing right here. And this would have been above water during the last ice age. It seems to show that, where today you just sail right over it. See right here, kind of seems to, but it's arguable. It's arguable, but we don't know. We don't know. So some people say it shows it. It looks like it shows it to me. Other people say they got lazy and they were stupid and they ran out of space, so they just bent South America around this way. That doesn't sound right. But we don't care about any of that. Here's Africa, okay? And so I'm going to go back to this map so we can see it better. Here's Africa. So, God, it's really hard to tell in this orientation. Even I get confused. Here's the Strait of Gibraltar. Here's the coast. And then I just told you where there would be a river. Right here. See, here are these two. Here's the car. Here are the two little peninsulas. Here's where the river is. Look at the Piri Reis map. Where'd it go? There's a river. And look what it does. It's so hard to see, but it leads to a kooky little city. That's a city. Here we go. Kooky little city with a castle surrounded by a ring of water.
Huh.
This is the Sahara Desert in 1500. This is an Ottoman navigator who his life is going to depend on this and using this map isn't going to accept a map on the coast of Africa, which is very well known, that shows a river where there is no river leading into the Sahara Desert and showing cities and cities on surrounded by rings of water with it's just sand. That's all it is, sand today. But here's the interesting thing. Plato tells us that the way to Atlantis was blocked after the cataclysm by a shawl of mud. Well, look at this. This is a waterway, and they put a big lump of something blocking it. So I find that interesting. When we look at the actual topology, here's that feature. Get rid of it. Hold on. Here's this feature. Here's this feature right here. And this is where I think people always ask me, where do we dig? I think we dig right here, because these are just hills of mud. It's just dirt. It's just compact mud. There's nothing to them, and they don't even make any geological sense. But if a tsunami came up, wiped all this out, this is, we know there was at least 100 foot of topsoil in Atlantis, because Plato tells us they had to dig a canal that was 100 feet down. And he also tells us, he says, here's what he says. He says, after the cataclysm, he says, the earth has fallen away all around and sunk out of sight. The consequence is that in comparison of what was then, there are remaining only the bones of the wasted body, as they may be called, as in the case of the small islands, all the richer and softer parts of the soil having fallen away, and the mere skeleton of the land being left. Well, if this isn't a skeleton, you know what I mean? I don't know what is. So it lines up good. Other things line up too. He tells us they had to dig a 50 stadia canal from the outer ring to the inner ring. This was where the palace was. And he says it ended in a harbor. And he says they cut a channel of the outer ring 3 stadia, which is 1,800 feet. So I found this hole right here. I'm going to look at it. And when we measure it, it's about, goddamn, feet. It's about 1,800 feet. That's interesting. Okay. He said that it was 50 stadia, which is 5.75 miles. They cut the canal. So you come in here, you go back to miles. 5.75 miles. He said it ended in an inner harbor. You know, does this not look like a harbor? Right? I don't know. I mean, it just, but that's fine. That's well and good, and it's very compelling. But the other thing he tells us, he says that it sat on a plain that had 60,000 10 stadia by 10 stadia farms. So massive agriculture. And he says they had dug a ditch around the entire plain that was 10,000 stadia total in length. And he says the plain was roughly 2,000 by 3,000 by 2,000 by 3,000, which you can map that out, right? I mean, so in other words, this is the only place on the planet that has room for that. But what's interesting, and this is my contribution to the Atlantis search, is if you look, where do they go? I always have a hard time. Here we go. Okay, you start to look up here. There's 2 places. You start to look here along these ridges, and you zoom in, and you start to get some really interesting topology and geography, and it starts to become almost grid-like and very interestingly formed. And then I looked up here. I'm like, what are these? What is this? You know, because these striations aren't everywhere. You know, you just go right here, nothing, right? But here, and I looked at it, I'm like, wait a second. He talks about all the irrigation, because if you're going to be good at agriculture, you got to move water. And to move water, basically you dig ditches. That's basically it. And I look, I'm like, well, are these wind cut? And first off, no, the wind doesn't blow this way. It blows this way. But they go under the sand. All these things go under the sand. Like, what the hell is it? And then I look more and I'm like, wait a second. This is exactly what a farm looks like, a giant farm with massive agriculture. And if it's raining, right, what they're doing is they're controlling the flow of water. So then I had a geologist look at it, and I sent him basically this picture, like right here. And I said, what do you think? And I didn't tell him anything about Atlantis or anything. And they're like, you know, when you get down to it, these near grid-like, or I think I sent this over here too, in the grid-like pattern, the water was flowing in a grid-like pattern. And I'm like, what are these rocks? Because my first thought was, is this like they went and cut thousands and thousands of rocks? And then what the geologist told me, she says, no, what these are, all this black right here, these are evaporites, they call them. And they cover everywhere. So we got lucky. So basically what happens is when the sea came in, it sat here, and a lot of it evaporated and a lot of it ran back, but all the salt stays, right? Because all salt is sodium chloride and it all comes from the sea. Right. So so what these are salt evaporites. And what happens is, so the salt settles, and then because it's exposed, the sun cooks it for hundreds of years. So it gets hard as a rock. But what it's done is it's preserved. Look at how much detail is there. It has preserved all these earthworks to some degree. So we can now go look at them, because it's the wind and erosion of 10,000 years didn't change them, because they're covered in this foot thick covering of cooked evaporated salt. So that's interesting. But there's all kinds of crazy things you find when you look in here. Let's see if I can find. Oh, but so I did a lot of research. I'm like, what pattern? What pattern? Because it's a pattern. What pattern is this? I'm like, oh shit, you know what this is? This is proto-terrace farming. This is what the earth looks like when you terrace farm it. So like if you go search for terrace farms, and these are rice fields in Thailand and stuff, you get this striated look, and you get the weird, whatever that look is, whatever this look is, it's because it's a terrace. It's a terrace farm. This is probably the world's first terrace farm. Plato tells us they were good at agriculture, and he gives a scale to it that is mind blowing. And we see all through here, we see striations, we see all the work done on the land to control the flow of water, and it looks exactly like a terrace farm. And now, if this were the only place, you'd be like, well, okay, maybe that's an anomaly though, because we don't see it everywhere. It's not just the wind. Hold on. Go north, young man. There we go. Okay. So I look more, and sure enough, I found another place where they have it down here. And then when you look at it 2D, you're trying to figure out what it is. But when you go 3D, you realize this is like an entry channel. This would have been a river. And look what they've done. They've flattened the tops of the mountains, and they have canals. Why do you do this? Why would you do this on the tops of mountains? Because you're preserving the topsoil. If it just rained, the topsoil runs off. This way you control it, and you maximize the use of water. Because it's not just going everywhere, right? But you're flowing it where you want it.
God, the amount of work that would have had to go into that is astounding.
And that's what, and Plato tells us that. I don't have the quote here, but he says something along the lines of, these are the most beautiful mountains you will ever see, anywhere in the world. And when I look at terrace farming, it's like, yeah, I mean, they just look incredible. And he says, you will not believe that people could have done this. He says they started with a good spot, but they have worked it, and you would just not believe. And then when you look at it, and I mean, trying to imagine sailing up this, and you're a caveman, don't forget. I mean, this is 9600 BCE, and you stumble into this, and it's incredible. And what I tell people, and they say, well, that's stupid, they would have done that. Well, wait a second, hold on. Okay, what do we know? So here's where we're at. We know this whole area here, all this brown was green, just like Georgia. Mm-hmm. This right here, lake, was the biggest freshwater lake on the planet, Lake Chad. Big freshwater lake up here. Nothing but rivers and rainfalls, and just, a beautiful place. We found more Stone Age tools than you could imagine in this area. Okay. If this is a lake.
Before we get into that, let's take another quick break.
Okay.
And we'll be right back. This episode of the Blue Collar Enlightenment Show is brought to you by Andrea Mason, the global voice.
Andrea's mission is to help groups and individuals achieve rapid growth and personal freedom. Andrea helps her clientele go from victim to victorious.
Escape the perpetual storm by creating your path to clear skies and personal growth. Plan a life according to you. Andrea invites you to take the first step. Press play and visit AndreaMasons.com.
Use the promo code TheBCE Show for your free consultation and change your life today.
And we are back.
Great. Yeah. So Joan, I was able to get this map the right size. I know we already covered it, but it's just when it's orientated right, our brains do a much easier job of seeing it. So here's the whole map. Here's the Antarctic piece we were talking about, but then you can come up here, and it just makes visually more sense. So here's the river. Here's the shawl of mud that's blocking it. I showed you where that was already, and then here's the kooky city. Right, surrounded by a ring of water.
Oh,
Isn't that weird?
Look at all the green up there in the part right there.
Yeah, and some of the landmarks that Plato gives us. He says the mountains were green, and they're some of the most beautiful mountains in the world. He tells us there are lots of elephants, lots of elephants, and then all the other stuff. The other thing, and this is just anecdotal, but what I think is interesting is see like that. I don't know what that is. Isn't that weird though? It's like just sitting there. It's not islands. So I was like, what is that? I mentioned I was in Panama for so long. When you look at the mouth of the Panama Canal, you wind up with all these boats. Yeah. They're all waiting their turn to go up the canal. And it's like, huh. I mean, is that like a cultural memory? Like this is the staging area and you're waiting your turn to go up the river? I don't know. No one knows. It's unknowable. It's just weird. And it's not that's not land, that's something else. But it's unreadable. You can't read what it says.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what were we talking about? What are we
It looks like chicken scratch to me.
I think it's Arabic or something. Yeah. So all right. Yeah. So I mean, so that's kind of the pitch, and so and like I said, there's the we get to that date 9600 because Plato, who's writing here, tells us this guy named Solon goes here, that temple I showed you, in 600 BCE. And who this guy Solon is, these are all real historical figures. These aren't just names. Solon was the first Greek to introduce the idea of democracy. So arguably, Solon is the father of democracy as we know it. So he's an important guy. In 600 BCE, what he was doing was going around the known world for the Greeks, which was pretty much, this right here, and talking to people. So he went to go to Egypt. That's a well-known, powerful, society. And he's learning. He's trying to figure out this democracy thing. And when he's here in Sais, I think it was like right here-ish, they tell him that when they get to the Atlantis story, they tell him it's their ancient history. And they tell him it happened 9,000 years ago. So you add 9,000 plus 600, you get 9,600 BCE, which is a magical date. It is magical. It is the end of the last ice age, almost to the day, almost to the hour. It's also, and the ice age ended with this thing called the Younger Dryas, which you hear people talk about a lot. And it turns out, well, what does that mean? They're just words. So, well, it turns out there are three Dryases. There's the Younger Dryas, the Older Dryas, and the Oldest Dryas. And so I had to ask the question, well, what the hell, what's a Dryas? Turns out a Dryas is a flowering plant that does really well in cold weather at high elevations. So they call these Dryas events because when they dig into the strata and they know how far, when they know they're at 9,600 BCE, they find tons of these flowers, and then they don't find them anymore. So they know there was a temperature change, and that's how they can figure the temperature out. And the temperature supposedly increased 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit. No one knows how quickly, but under a year, more likely 6 months, and it could have been overnight. There's all kinds of anecdotal evidence of flash frozen woolly mammoths and all kinds of stuff where like maybe, something happened and all the climate changed, real quick. But none of that matters. That with the date's important because it's the day that the ice age ended and the sea levels started to rise. And as you can see in our analysis, sea levels, feed the entire analysis. But it's not like there's 100 of these events and he just happened to land on one of them. This is it. This was the only time it ever happened. And he got the date exactly right. So, is it really a coincidence? And then he's, I mentioned he's explaining, like we talked about Malta, and then we look at the lower sea levels, and he says there was fighting here. Basically, you can interpret that from his story, and then we find Neolithic construction that's at least consistent with that. Mm-hmm. He tells us that the capital city was had a center island, and then alternating zones of water and rings of land. He tells us it was 5 3/4 miles from the outside to the inside. He tells us it's 345 miles from the sea. He tells us there were mountains to the north and it was open to the south. I'm trying to get it orientated right. There we go. Okay. All right. So north is up, mountains, open. Got that. He tells us that it was King Atlas. So these are the Atlas Mountains, just right to the north of it, all through here. These are all called the Atlas Mountains. And then we have other corroborating evidence. So writing in 480 BCE-ish, there's this guy named Herodotus. He was a Greek historian. He's known as the father of history. He's writing about 100 years before Plato wrote-ish. And he's the first person who tries to really record what happened, like objectively. He's not writing state propaganda. He's trying to just, write down what's going on, because a lot's going on. So he writes about the Persian Wars, and all kinds of stuff in this thing called the Histories. The history starts off about the first third is like a travel log, where he's just trying to set the stage, saying, okay, here's where Greece is, here's where Athens is, you go down here, and here's where Sparta is, you go over here, and here's Turkey, and here's Persia, and here's Egypt, and then he says, when you get to Egypt, and everything is like it's in travel, time, and stadia. So he'll say, you go 200 stadia, or you travel for 10 days, that kind of stuff. So he says, you get to Egypt, he explains Egypt, and he says, you head west, which is here, into Libya, and you get in here somewhere. And what he says in the Histories is you run into these people who call themselves the Atlanteans. And they are really crazy, kooky people. They extend all the way from like the middle part of Libya all up to the Atlas Mountains. And the Atlanteans, they don't have a writing system. They refuse a writing system, and they have names, but they won't let you write down their names or their king names or any of that stuff. So no writing. They're vegetarians, which is bizarre at this time period. So they don't eat meat. They live on these weird huts they build on top of salt piles. They spend their days cursing the sun, and they don't drink. Okay. Well, so they're weird. So there's some weird cultural memory he's run into. But if you look at this, and if this is where you live, and this all gets covered in water, a tsunami comes up here and wipes it out, the people that are going to survive are, in the mountains or up here, whatever, where do you end up? This all becomes blistering desert. You end up here. Yeah. So, I mean, geographically, he's talking about, and these people lived, in 500 BCE, not 9,000 BC. So it's contemporary to when he's writing, but geographically, culturally, and linguistically, it makes total sense. If you lived here and this gets wiped out, everything changes. The remnants of your society ends up here, because this is where trade and people are. There's nothing here in the middle. So it's interesting. That's interesting. The other thing that is often a criticism is people say that Plato made it up, or that it was an oral tradition and it got passed down, through 100 generations or 50 generations. So the story, it can't be consistent, right? But we've touched on it, but just to close the loop, that's not at all the case. It was written on the walls. This guy Solon went there. The priest helped him. He deciphered it. He translated it into Greek. He brought it back. The two dialogues we're talking about, one's called Critias, one's called Timaeus. It's actually Timaeus. I can't say that. The Critias has like a hard I, and the Timaeus. So I just say Critias and Timaeus. But the Critias, who is talking in the Critias dialogue, he says that he has these writings from Solon and he studied them. So this isn't an oral tradition. We're talking about someone went to the temple, wrote down what it said, and then this guy is reading back what it said, which is interesting. But then when Plato died, what he was really famous for in his time period was he created the first university. He called it the Academy. And when he died, this guy there were two people up for the job of taking over for him. One was the guy named Aristotle, who we've all heard of, and there was another guy named Crantor. And I don't know how it got decided, but Crantor got the job to run the academy instead of Aristotle. So Aristotle kind of pouts off, and he goes north up here to Macedonia, and then he tutors Alexander the Great and has a brilliant career. But Crantor, who was a supporter of Plato's, which is probably why he got the job, Aristotle wasn't. Aristotle dings Plato all the time. Crantor then went back to this temple in 350 BCE and verified the writings. He verified the translation was correct. He verified, what the notes that they had in the Critias dialogue and the Timaeus dialogue were accurately transcribed from the walls. If it said 50 stadia, that's what was written down, all that kind of stuff. So we have independent verification after Plato when this temple was still there. So it all comes together. My point is, it all comes together. And then when you look at things like I showed you on Malta, and you start to dig into the Neolithic evidence, and you start to do this, the sea level analysis, and you look for anomalies, and you look for megalithic constructions that are sitting on land that was only up during the last ice age or before. To me, I mean, the Malta anomaly, there it is. We can see it. In 9,600 years ago, someone built a giant temple on a piece of land that went underwater. Well, that establishes the date. There's, there's no gap. You know what I mean? This is what people think. There's this huge gap between the academic view of Atlantis and like me or you or kooky people or all these crazy researchers. Now, some people say ridiculous things about Atlantis. I mean, Atlantis was not ended in a nuclear war. It isn't the moon, all that kind of stuff. But when you strip all that away and you just look at all the places and whether we currently think people were there or not, and what we think they were doing or not, and we just accept that Atlantis was a Neolithic society, just like Göbekli Tepe, just like these other ones, at that same level of technology, except they found a really good place to live. So why wouldn't they start doing agriculture? And then we look where we think their capital was, and we find signs of massive, massive agriculture at a date and location that only could have happened during the last ice age. Again, it all lines up. Is kind of it, and it's a coherent story, and there's no leaps of faith, there's no magic, and there's no contradiction to the current micro academic views. The facts aren't in dispute. It's only how we interpret those facts, which that's just people, and that's just there's no right or wrong way to interpret a fact. It is what it is.
Right.
Yeah. So
and it's very compelling stuff because who is it? We're talking about Graham Hancock, and he was on Joe Rogan's podcast as well as Randall
Carlson. Yep.
Yeah, Randall Carlson, and he's been doing research around the globe about these catastrophic floods that happened in that same time frame and how that connects in as well.
Yeah, Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock don't agree on everything, but they agreed to that 9,600 date, and they agree to, I think, the level of the society. And I agree with them on all of that stuff. Where I diverge from them, Randall Carlson is obsessed with the Azores being where the capital city of Atlantis was, and none of these other places. And I just you can't get there. There's not enough land here. There's other pieces of data we haven't gone over. This wasn't the capital. It just wasn't. It's impossible. So I wish he wouldn't say that, because the other work he's done is absolutely brilliant. He's found, like I've said, this was I believe this was one of the provinces. And when you look at the way trade works, you kind of go out this way. When you come back, you come back and you come back through the Azores. So it would have been trade rich. So all the stuff he's finding fits perfectly, I believe, to the Azores being a province, and actually fits with the geography and how everything works. Graham Hancock, I don't know him. I have no what do they call it? I have no authority to call him by his first name. But he has taken the name or the word Atlantis, and he has used it as a brand for all of the ancient societies that were going on in the Ice Age. And I understand why he's done it. It's easier to communicate that. It's a word that everyone knows. The problem is, we both agree that there was more going on in 9600 BCE, but Atlantis wasn't global. I've only seen the first episode of his show, which I like, by the way, but he's over here in the Philippines somewhere talking about, crazy, amazing things, but this isn't Atlantis. There's no Atlantis over here. I mean, you can't get, you're not going to attack Greece from friggin' Hong Kong,
No.
or, so so there's a lot of name confusion going on right now with the name Atlantis. You mix that in with the fact, like we talked about to start this, that no one knows what it means when they say it. They talk about the capital, they're talking about the continent, they're talking about the kingdom. So it's all kind of mixed up, and the word just has all kinds of problems. But that's neither here nor there, because what Plato tells us Atlantis was, I've just spent whatever we've done 2 hours here going over it, and it's compelling. It's more than compelling. It's an airtight argument. Whether it's right or not, I don't know, but the argument holds water and doesn't contradict in any meaningful way any piece of knowledge we have about our past.
Right. And the further we go, the less the less we know anyway.
Yeah.
We,
Well,
we
yeah,
only know up to a certain point.
we're not getting closer to this stuff. We're getting farther away from it. And the
Yeah.
earth is changing. Yeah. So, yeah.
So, is there a growing number of scientists and historians and researchers that are catching on to this and actually wanting to put the time and effort and the research and the funds into going further with
No.
this research? No,
No.
they just don't care.
It doesn't work that way. We sit here and we talk about it and we try and project our own logical constructs into the academic world, but it's not like the academic world is some org chart of people all sitting in a room or on a campus. I mean, there's universities all over the world. I think there's 7,000 universities just in the US, and they don't coordinate with each other. Matter of fact, we hold universities up, and I do think they play an important role, but we hold them up as these knowledge repositories, right? But you want to go get an academic paper, they're all behind massive paywalls.
Right.
You have to pay hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to see these papers. And by the way, I mean, I was president of a university. It's not, the university is not called Yale or Yale University. Go look it up, it's Yale University, Inc. These are just companies. They're just companies, and their business was research and teaching. In the US anyway, over the past 10 years, their business has become billing financial aid. And that is, I swear to God, that's the case. I was there. I was a university president when they put that law into effect. I knew what it was going to do, and it's done it. So all they do now, they're just machines, and they just move people through, and they charge everything that the government will pay, and then they've basically inflated all of their tuitions back to the pre-tuition numbers, so people are paying what they've always paid, and then they just take the government money too. And it's billions, it's probably trillions of dollars.
Yeah, I read somewhere that these Ivy League schools have a surplus of like billions of dollars.
They don't pay taxes. This is we all say pay your fair share, and we rage against it sometimes. They're all nonprofits, so they're accumulating. We talk about, well, it's not fair that Elon Musk has so much money and he should give some of it back or something. These universities are sitting on billions of dollars in cash. Not physical cash, but and they don't pay taxes. They just collect and hoard. University professors, a tenured university professor, 15 years ago made between $80,000 and $100,000. Today, a tenured university professor makes between $250,000 and $380,000. Go look it up.
Good money.
They work 6 hours a week.
That's good money.
I get it. Good deal, right? Yeah, good work if you can find it.
Right.
The problem is, then what they all do, especially when you talk about anthropology and history and all these things, is they specialize. So it's not like there's an academic somewhere sitting who's the Atlantis academic who we have to go to and register our findings with, and that person is cataloging everything, and at some point they go, oh, okay, we found 100 things on this item, so it's tipped, and now it's mainstream. That doesn't happen. They're all compartmentalized, they're all localized, and they're all specialized. So I actually went looking, and I was trying to find a physical anthropologist who was an expert in West Africa, so I could talk to someone about this Green Sahara and what it means and everything. And I found a very nice guy. I talked to him for a while. He's the professor of physical anthropology at like King's College at London, stuff like that. A player, a big dude. And what he told me, and he's the only person on the planet that is kind of an expert. Everyone pointed me to him. I'm talking to him. He's like, no one knows. We don't know. No one knows. And he's not mad about it. He's not hiding anything. It's just they don't know. I'm like, well, he's doing research. And he's like, no. He's funded to research something over here. He's got some project he's working on in Eastern Africa. But it's just wherever the funding sends them is where they go. And they're not curious in the way that we want them to be, because it's a job. It's their job. They get up in the morning, they take their shower, they drink their coffee, they go to work, they go to their meetings. They don't give a shit. They're not questing for knowledge. Now, if they can get a big research grant to go research something, they'll research it. But let me tell you, if Lockheed Martin is donating $500 million to research aerospace designs, I guarantee you that Lockheed Martin is doing it because it's good for Lockheed Martin, not good for whoever's researching the aerospace designs. Whatever it is. So all of this research money comes from someone and somewhere, and all the places that are putting in these big dollars, they want to get something from it. So what started happening when I got out of the business is we started calling them customers. So research grants, the people funding the research are the customer. Well, that opens up a big can of worms. How can it be? Okay, if they're the customer, then they're always right. Well, if they're always right, and I find something that says what they want to find is wrong, what are that means they're going to find someone else who will say what they want to hear.
Right.
So I'm out of my job. So I'll just tell them what they want to hear. And it's not blatant. It's not like people are purposefully lying. But if you're looking at something and you say, okay, was this Atlantis? And then you got a room full of 10 people staring back at you and lights are on you. And they want you to say no. You know that's what they want to hear. And they're asking you, what are you going to, odds are, yeah, it could be, but there's nothing definitive. So I can't really say, okay, no. Just like I'm not gonna be able to pull it up. I closed my screen. There's the temple I told you that was north of Mali. You go to the Wikipedia page and it says this is allegedly a sunken megalithic structure. I'm like, why does it say allegedly? Where'd that come from? So I went on Wikipedia and it's got a reference number. So I went to the article and it's all bullshit. It was some psychic's website from 20 years ago. The article doesn't even talk about what academics think, but it's posted on Wikipedia. And there's a line that says academics, the Malta academics are not convinced it's worth studying. But it's just made up. But now it's out there. So now guys like me have to dispel people. People do a quick read. They go to Wikipedia and says, oh, it says it's alleged, and it says that academics don't think it's worth studying. So it's bullshit. So so Dave's full of shit. Is there? But it's baseless. Someone just typed it into Wikipedia, and the reference is not a real reference. And right. The reference was an article written 15 years ago by a guy who died in 2012, who used to be on Ancient Aliens a lot. And the article, what he actually wrote, and he wrote it when they had just found it. They only found this temple in 1999. And he wrote, I'm having a hard time, convincing academics that it's worth investigating, which is the classic thing ancient alien people say, but here are all the reasons why I think it's a temple. And that's used as a reference on Wikipedia to say academics don't think it's it's just, it's so hard to get real information, I guess is my rant.
Yeah, there's so much noise out there on the internet, and some people don't want to change what we've already learned.
I put my videos out for Atlantis and I'll get lots of criticism on them, but it's not, matter of fact, I have lots of criticism on things I actually address in the video, and I debunk just like the person criticizing the video is debunking it, but they didn't watch the video. They just see the title or whatever, and they want to criticize. They want to cast doubt on it. So you get criticism. It's not even based on what you're saying, because I agree with them. Because everything I'm doing is based on science or reality, or at least things we can see.
Yeah, and a lot. We got to remember, science has to come off of hard facts. Can't come off of
Well, that's how. Like, I guess there's some historical science, if that's even what history really is, isn't like that, because they're very conservative, which is fun talking to them, because they're not often conservative people politically, but they're conservative when it comes to their profession. I often rib them sometimes about that. But like what they'll do is they will pick, like for one of the monoliths I was looking at, they said, well, the date was 9,550 BC. Like, why wouldn't you just say 9,600? Why have a 50-year difference? And it's because they don't want it to line up. They don't want it to be easily identifiable as part of Atlantis, because Atlantis will ruin their career. And I find this a lot. I mentioned those people I talked to at the different colleges. I had the dean of philosophy at Yale University lined up to talk to me about Plato, because when I started this, I wanted to get it. What's the view of, can we treat Plato's dialogues as true history as opposed to just philosophy? And as soon as I started asking her questions about which dialogues I was interested in, she picked up pretty much that I was an Atlantis person and wouldn't talk to me anymore. The same thing, I was working with a geochemist that was going over all that evaporite stuff with me. And then when I started asking questions, well, do you think maybe this is like ancient Neolithic farming or agriculture. And they back off, and they don't want to be part of it. No, I don't know. All the stuff I said, I don't know. No, that would, if it was, it would have already been found. That's what she actually told me. If those were farms, they would have already found it, and there would be tremendous, noise around it, because this would change everything. I'm like, they haven't already found it. I found it. So how do we tell? But she backed away from it, and that happened. Every expert that I've gone to that has any clout, once they will not associate themselves with Atlantis. The only way they would do it is if I could bring them on to poo-poo or dismiss it, which of course I'm not interested in doing. So
yeah, horrible.
Yeah, it just is. Whatever. So we got to have shows like yours and people like me, and we just got to get out there and tell them. We just got to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm all about bringing the new and different opinions on, and I want to give those people a voice. And the great thing about podcasting is I can bring whoever I want on.
Yeah.
And what you have and the research you've done and what you've shown me, I'm a believer in it. I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't want to push and research for this kind of type of history when all that evidence is right there anyway.
Well, yeah, and
because it is part of our past, and if we can find out, hey, we had civilizations a little bit further than what we thought. Well, what's before that?
What's
before that?
Yeah. Well, and what did they know? And what did they do? And more importantly, if these things keep getting wiped out, is there a schedule to it? Is there something we need to know? Because maybe there is a pattern, and I kind of believe that a little bit. I don't know what it is, but it does seem like. In fact, there's a chart that I saw that I haven't included in my research because I haven't re-verified it myself, and it looked a little wonky to me. But it showed all the zodiac houses, whatever, the 12 houses, and then it showed it had it was like a circle, and it showed the years when the Earth was in the different houses. And I think it was like the transition from, I don't know, toward there was a line where the transition at the same place, like almost every time, massive bad things happened. They could line up the volcanic eruptions and floods and the ice ages and all that stuff. And I was like, that is compelling. If that's where if I can find enough of this out and then do that research myself and verify that the zodiac precession, when we change the zodiac, there's some of them that seem to align to disasters. I think that's interesting and very helpful to us as a species. And if I get done with all this and I find there is no pattern, that's helpful to know too, I think. So
yeah, I listened to something, and they were talking about how there's a certain time of the year where we actually go through an asteroid belt.
Yeah.
And then we come back out of it, and then there's 2 cycles that we go through every year that we go through the asteroid belt. And there's plenty of speculation out there that when we went through that asteroid belt, that's when kind of all of this started kickstarting.
I kind of think so. We don't know. There's a lot of things that we don't know as a species.
Yeah.
But you go back and you try and line up the major disasters we know about, and of course it gets harder the farther back you go. But it seems like every 6,000 years something bad happens. Then every 12,000 years something bad happens, and like every 26,000 years, and then like every 128,000 years or something. And some of them aren't that bad. But then some of them seem just absolutely devastating. They seem to correlate to ice ages and thaws and that kind of stuff. And someone had done it. I just don't know if they're full of shit, because you never know what you're seeing. I'm just on the internet, so I've got to do the research myself, and I haven't done it yet. But that'll be once I get done with the Atlantis stuff, and I feel like I've established that date. Then the next thing I'm going to do is zodiac precession and cataclysms, and see if I can find a pattern.
Well, that's going to be interesting. I'm gonna have to bring it. I'm gonna have to keep in touch, and you're going to have to keep coming on, so that way we can learn more about this, and everybody can definitely go check you out. Well, I think that's a pretty good episode for right now. What do you think?
That feels pretty good to me. It's the longest one I've ever done.
That's
so
awesome.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Well, yeah, very compelling evidence, and I'm definitely I'm falling down the rabbit hole, I guess you could say. There's a lot of rabbit holes that I've fell down during this, and I'm still hooked. Like
Yeah.
the first one is MK Ultra. That one I'm still hooked on. I don't want to touch it again, but I have to. It's just one of those things. If somewhere down the line it's going to come back and bite me, and I need to finish that segment up. That's the first episode of the podcast. If you go back and listen to it,
Okay.
and I got it's MK Ultra #1. You can't squeeze that out in an hour-long podcast period.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's and that's what with the Atlantis stuff. I know we're wrapping up. I mean, I wrote the book is a short book. It's just a proof, basically. And the video series I'm doing, I'm going for slow memory. Some people are like, dude, just tell me the answer. I'm like, I've tried just saying the answer, and you can't, because then you wind up and then you're just another person with, and people speculate, and they argue. It's like, no, this is how it is. We got to lay the thing out, and if no one winds up watching it, no one will. But when I'm done with it, it will be a video essay of a history of Atlantis, and it's going to be a unifying theory that identifies all the gaps between what we need for Atlantis to be true and what we know academically, and there aren't that many gaps. And then it'll paint the whole picture, and then I believe it will be the seminal work on Atlantis, and then I'll move on to something else. And I should be done with this. I think by the end of 2023, if not sooner.
that's a long way to go.
Yeah, it's a long way to go. It's a lot of videos.
Well, hopefully a lot more research that's going into it by other people that will add in and really get it going, because it's obviously going to take a collective group and a collective mindset to
I've got
it happen.
David Stig Hansen he and I we're friendly to each other. We both we're probably like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. Like, we believe like 85% of the same stuff, but we're in the same area. And this guy David, he was actually there. He was there the entire month of October, and he kept me in the loop. And I asked him to check on a couple things, and he did. So he's willing to go on the ground and do the work. So with me in the books and him on the ground, I think we got a pretty good team.
That's awesome. Well, where can everybody find you? Social media, YouTube, all that.
Yeah, I don't know. As you well know, I'm pretty hard to get a hold of. Frequency99.com is the website. Frequency99, the nines are numbers, frequency99.com. That's, if you just go there, then there's contact information from my publicist and all that stuff. Or if you go to YouTube, the channel is A History Of. So if you go to YouTube /the @ A History Of, it'll take you to all these videos. There's a link to that from that website too, frequency99.com.
Yeah, and then all your books, you got all those books back there that we'll have to talk about sooner or later.
Yeah, if everyone who listens buys all of my books, I will have a good Christmas.
Yeah, actually, Christmas is
2.5 weeks. Yeah.
That's crazy.
This won't be out by then, will it? So, oh well.
No, you're actually going to be my next one up.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. This is fresh. This is going to be coming out Sunday. So
Sunday.
Everybody finally gets to kind of see my beautiful face.
They're gonna have a big weekend.
Oh yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. And like I said, you're always welcome on. I enjoy this conversation, and I believe there's probably more to it that we should probably talk about.
No, good, John. I appreciate your professionalism also and your questions. Very, very, very good interview. So
I will definitely have more once I watch this again and I go through and edit. I will have plenty.
Okay. Yeah, ask me. And if we do this again, I don't mind tough questions or naysayer questions either. I get all of them, and I've got answers for all of them. So anything, so that the people listening or you, whatever, ask everything you want to ask. And there's either an answer or there's not, but I know whether there is one or there isn't, so I can let you know, and then we can make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, and if you're listening out there and you want to send me a question to add onto my list, I'll feel free to ask it. That would be a good way to do it.
Yeah, please. Very much so. Yep.
All right, man. That's all the time we have for today. You can find us on our new website, thebceshow.com. Go check it out, where you can contact us and subscribe. But remember to give us a rate and review. It helps the podcast with that pesky algorithm. Thanks for listening.